Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very excited. You're the kind of audience that I've been waiting for to talk exactly about this topic. Because I've been thinking about this question and obsessing over it. I'm a city and regional planner by training, and our discipline is interdisciplinary, and it is focused on addressing, well, one ideal that I've adopted is that I believe that we can study public policy relevant issues to then inform decision makers that are going to decide on the public distribution of resources to address social problems. And since usually we don't have a whole lot of funds or support available for these kinds of problems, sometimes they don't even exist. If they're not in the record, they're not there to be discussed upon. So I thought that, it would be necessary to examine this. So my study has been, focused on looking at one particular public policy relevant issue within the studies of society and technology, okay? And I do take an interdisciplinary mixed methods approach, and the intellectual work that I'll present to you stems from the intellectual work of my advisor, Manuel Castells. He was my chair, thesis advisor, and if you haven't read his work, please go ahead. I invite you to get caught up in what he's saying. So I just want to let you know that that's where my work began. So hopefully today I convince you that digital destitution is a concept, a theoretical framework for explaining a social exclusion, inequality, and poverty, except under a different form. And that poverty does evolve. So here's my outline, and I'll try to, this is a very complex issue that would require more time. So I'm going to do my best to just give you a quick brief, as clear as possible. I heard you guys ask a lot of questions, and that's great. I love that. So please, if it is very confusing for you or you can't wait, go ahead and raise your hand for some clarity points. So my outline here is to begin with what is digital destitution. It is a concept that I developed because I found that when I began this study in the early 90s, to be convinced with Manuel Castells saying that the social structure is changing with the integration of technological innovations and policy changes, and that we ought to think about the ways in which our system is adapting or not. And I began to think about, well, what is the effect on the low income, since that's my expertise, poverty and economic development. And I hope to find practical solutions that are grounded so that we can then inform those policymakers. So I hope then to explain how does digital destitution operate, and then using US Census, the latest available, most generalizable, though limited, but nonetheless the only thing we have that the government says reflects the inequality and ownership to technology, I will use to then let you know who's affected in California. So I began actually this question in a sociology class with Manuel Castells, and I thought I was going to answer it in 25 pages, and now it's become a career. So the question that I began to pose at that time is, okay, accepting that the society is changing. Not at the time, there was a lot of debate. It has reduced some, but some people still engage. Is that not whether, but under what conditions, through what social process, and under what governance structures could members of ethnic and social groups living in poverty benefit from the use of new information and communications network technology in the knowledge economy and network society. I wanted to thought that it would be necessary to address this question because we would have to update the mechanism that would address this, as we do have social responsibility guidelines to abide by. But it turned out that before I get to that question, there was a precursor question that I needed to address for myself, because at the time too, there was very little attention to this problem in the early 1990s. There was some discussion, some people wrote, there were some conferences, people were talking about it. It really picked up in the late 1990s, and then it became public discourse when President Clinton brought it to the pulpit. digital divide. And there was some investment thrown at it, and attention, data collected, a campaign around it to discuss this inequality. Then there was a transfer of political change in terms of the governance with the Bush administration, and a focus on the war distribution. The distribution and attention of these types of programs got reduced and pushed elsewhere. So anyways, there's different positions in terms of that. And in order for you to see, for us to see, I believe, what the effect of being offline is, what it gets down to it, is that there was the field that I confronted as a student trying to, at the time, which was going to measure the impact of technology in terms of the inequality and educational outcomes, and I was going to prove that this is a problem. And then I confronted the field itself and the limits, and I found too that the frameworks that were available were limited in being able to articulate what I was observing and saw through the statistics, and also just through my observations and qualitative research work. So in order to begin to basically start from scratch, because this was inductive questions, was that I had to then raise what new forms, that question to be clear, what new forms of inequality arise with the integration of technology into the productive functions of society under conditions of inequality and poverty. And as students, I really urge you to always do your theory or baseline or study grounded in the empirical record, but with a focus on change. There are some things constant that don't get erased, and I think that's where we get into trouble in terms of actually predicting and finding solutions to the problems. So that was the question. After over 18 years of obsessive thought and study and following the agents that are involved in constructing resources, developing policies, designing programs, pushing the agenda at the national and international level, following the discussion, looking at the national development plans, examining what is being said, looking at what is being written and documented, and how the people who are not connected being talked about. Again, the problem was too reductionist in the framework that was popular at the time. So I had to develop a concept to come to terms with it, that the effect was actually greater than just having technology or not technology, right? So what is the issue here? So how we frame the problem determines how we envision solutions. So here, my argument here is that the multiplier effect of the introduction of technological innovations integrated into the productive functions of the society, right? Under conditions of inequality and lack of intervention, is digital destitution. And that is analytically defined as an institutional and a social and a dynamic, constantly changing social and institutional process of alienation and a state of deprivation from the productive functions of society based on network technology. And I want to emphasize network technology. That encompasses multiple devices and different modalities in terms of how we utilize it. Listservs and social media and the different types of functions that are popular. Also, the argument here is that the inability to manipulate the productive function of technology autonomously. That means that it's a kind of a fuzzy term that I'm still working on kind of, really being more precise about, but I think it comes down to you doing it for yourself, at whatever level you're at. Your inability to do that does result in social disadvantages. And I'm seeing in the field in my qualitative record. I had the chance to evaluate a $10 million investment here in California, the California Connects program, which is a broadband technology opportunities program, which is a national civic investment in California to address the inequality in broadband. And I heard it over and over again. We're now seeing I now am seeing the actual tangible proof of this theoretical framework when people are telling me or reacting in such ways that reflect that there is a social stigma for not having or utilizing, or shame, even denial of interest based on their They don't want to admit that they don't know. You know, kind of hard. And it's also an economic cost. Increasingly, the more we do this, the more costly it becomes. So if you want to get a ticket for American Airlines, you have to pay $25 extra if you don't do it online, if you have to call or something like that. So there's an actual numeric amount of dollars that we can actually enumerate based on the processes that exist. And, you know, okay, so now we have to get into, well, what's the indicator for this? And there are different types that I've been working on, but the one that I'm going to focus on today, because it's the perfect indicator, I think, for digital destitution, is your broadband subscription, and whether you have it at home or not. And it's perfect because it is while it's not like it's not good, there's other factors involved in my telling you what your returns on investment are in the technology. Right? I know that it's the basic mechanism that you need, that is required to get online, right? So I think it tells us something. So in order to understand what digital destitution is, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what my theory is that gets me to digital destitution. And that is that I view technology not just as a tool, right? And technology is a way of doing things. And technology is really, the way that I picture it is that technology is a process of production, consumption, and exchange. It always has been, but and that's not new, and it's always, you know, but what is new is the integration of this sets of network technology. This is kind of an old graphic, but I just want to point out these larger blocks, right? But this is the kind of information, different types of bits of information that are available, that are both public and private. This kind of information that's available, that's what's new. And the types of rules and now governance around its use in terms of social engagement and economic production, political participation and organization, and interaction with public institutions, right? So it doesn't matter if you're in China or, you know, here in the United States or different places, you know, depending on the institutional governance of that, determines that, affects that. So, and there's a mechanism that then gets, you know, where there's a demand for this mechanism to be able to abstract and extract value from that. And certain skill sets get developed through its use, right? And it goes through a whole range between, you know, doing it at one point, following directions, to embodying that capacity, right? So my argument here is that it's not like the poor disappear, but they're kept from this loop of that determines advantage and disadvantage, right? So there's a benefit and a function to that, right? So I think generally, and I want to say, you know, there's different points and capacities. The capacity of the technology matters as well. And, you know, like even something as electric or digital power. During the Clinton administration, for instance, they you know, gave some laptops and they gave it to this Native American young woman, but then she couldn't put it on, she couldn't activate it because there was no electricity. So there's like basic things like that, right? So there's a lot of question about why some people are not online. You know, that's also a social and institutional process, and there are push factors around that. It is precisely because some parts of the population are utilizing, integrating this technology into daily life functions, right? That other people who are not are disadvantaged, because you can do more at that time in real time when it's demanded or necessary. You could do that if you choose to, right? Doesn't mean you will, but if you wanted to, you could. So it happens that as technologies are integrated into the procedures and ways of doing life and institutional forms of interaction, right? And things begin to change in terms of how we interact. You can see it all over the built environment. And as more people use the technologies, then the expectations and norms is that you're online and ought to be online to communicate, you know, grow. So it gets to a point where you just have to function. And every day somebody is facing that. Okay, so now we get to how does that operate. A lot of people ask about why people are not, there's a lot of focus about attitudes and beliefs about people who are not adopters, right? For me, in the state of California, if you're telling me that you're not interested or don't need it, is an indication of digital destitution, precisely because it's not about your interests, really. And it's an indication of, it's more the effect of not being online rather than the cause, even though that actually complicates things, because it requires another level of education. So here, I want to point out that, you know, oftentimes too, we're like, do they benefit or not benefit? And the baseline, you know, is not really grounded, I think. Because while we're expecting people to be profiting without the inputs that are required and that make a difference in the types of benefits that we're seeking, which is human development and economic benefits for people, you know, we're still talking about diffusion for millions of people worldwide. Still talking about diffusion, why aren't they profiting? And that is as the other society who's been connected for some time has been cycling through this process, right? And their stages. And as a whole, the society right now, we're still at the integration stages, but it's occurring, right? And it has been going on. And so why is there a difference? Well, we have to look at the social structure, to look at the policies that exist, the resources that are available, the education, the culture. All that tells us something because it impacts the kinds of inputs too, the infrastructure investment, not just the technical parts, the preparation for people at the level that they're at. And the materials necessary for that to help people catch them up to the changes. They're living them, experiencing them, but taking it very personal as well. And you know, and think about the learning process is required to get people. For us, we study at Stanford, we study at UC Berkeley, we studied the places that were the beginners of this innovation and revolution, right? And some of you are very young, so I know that you're probably born into it. But there's also the skill set that is required. Then, you know, you have to look at these inputs in order to figure out and locate ourselves in terms of when we're, you know, set up to be productive, efficient, generate cost savings, and attain some profit. I just had to draw that because people were saying things that didn't make sense to me. And here, there also, I think what's important to ground is that why are people not benefiting as well? Is that there are other things that we have to take into account. So for instance, notice that we also have to, as you are young people who are going to be producing new ideas and do studies and invent applications and all the solutions you're going to create, right, through this great education that you're getting, all the value that you're going to create. You know, be careful about how we frame things and how we talk about it. And, you know, language does matter, framing does matter in terms of how, because I think if liberation technology is actually about creating research or applying research in ways that makes a difference, right, positive difference, right, then we have to be really careful about what we're saying and whether it's adding to the problem or reinforcing the issue, confusing things, or, you know, at least not reinforcing the problem, but hopefully create value. So here, notice that I don't call them late comers. I call them new entrants, because that is not, latecomers assumes that it was there before. You know, again, we're still talking about diffusion. So you know, I don't want to reinforce a problem like that. And it is important to recognize that it's about experience. Right? It takes time. And there were some people who are now at you could say at the highest levels of the technical and social skills in terms of their capacity to embody it, right? Because things build on things. Your technical skills continue to build on previous technical skills and the social norms that you learned through continuous social interaction. You gain something. It's very different to begin here as opposed to here because there's all time and experience that you had to develop and embody this collective knowledge that is systematized into everyday functions, and the growth is exponential. You don't know that until you're interacting with somebody who has never interacted online, you know, and then you're trying to share with them what you know. It doesn't matter how much you know. Then you recognize, whoa, this is a new language, a new way of doing things you can only really learn by doing. How do you get people started, right? I have this idea that we need to be working on the training, creating a mental structure about what the system is in a way that can be culturally, linguistically understood. You know, so that people can then begin to grasp to help them enter this learning curve. And it is steep, okay? So there's a time and experience gap. So also, like, adoption is a complex process, and I think that's really important because often we do these campaigns and we think that people are not interested. They're saying they're not interested. I found through my interviews that actually that meant nobody's taught me. I don't know how to use it, and I don't want to be shamed for it because they have, you know, and it's a proxy for that. That was one of my big surprises for some reason. Even though I know that, I was surprised to find that out. So a lot of people talk about what is the entry point. I think the entry point for me in this framework is that people should at least be taught digital functionality. People talk about digital literacy. I actually think that digital functionality is a term, but you don't necessarily have to learn how to read and write to function online. In fact, if you know how to function online on some basic level, it could teach you how to read and write if you know how to find the videos that are available online, if you know that they're there, right? Assuming that they are. But I think we need to at least have people be able to function online. We should aspire for at least that. And of course, that's just the beginning for more creative, productive things. This here just to show that, you know, also.
You said that for new adopters today, that a lot of times when they say they are not interested, it's because of these more structural problems. Is that independent of the age of the new entrants? Because like I do a lot of stuff with like young children. It's like if you like frame it to them, it's like we're teaching you this thing which you're behind on, and obviously no, they're going to be intimidated by it. But if you just show them, look, this thing is cool. Mm-hmm. Children in my like as younger students tend to have lower shame. Is that something which is just kind of my observations, or is that actually something which is substantial?
I think its frame matters all the time with whatever group you're talking about, you know. And let me see if I can, there's several things that come to mind when you raise this issue, right? So I got the chance to conduct focus groups and interviews with populations that were first starters, Spanish speakers, immigrants, many, farm workers in the 18-county area of California. And then I also got to like northern Sierra parts, right? And then white elders, you know, and then students who worked with them, right? So that was one thing that with cross sections that was found, that like a lot of people felt that other people treated them differently and like they were dumb, and they prevented themselves from continuing the process of asking questions that would facilitate their learning because they didn't want to deal with that kind of behavior. And it was frustrating. You can almost observe yourself doing it. I do. After knowing all this, I still do it, right? So, but about the age, one of my favorite populations is the 50 and overs, and those are the 65 and overs are highly disconnected. You know, this is a population that has yet to be recognized as somebody that is valuable and necessary to get online, and who also, this frame is poorly framed, that it's something about age that makes it not capable for people to learn, something about age. Anyways, one of the focus groups that I conducted with white elders, like elders, I don't know if they're elders, but they were like 50s and above, 65s mostly, 60s and above. And some of them were not ready to retire. A lot of them were not, you know. There's different reasons why they didn't adapt. Nonetheless, I asked one of them, you know, they say that one of the reasons why your age group is not online is due to lack of interest, you know, and lack of capacity. What do you say to that? And one woman said it best, I think, right on. She said, you know, I just think that some people, when you're young, you're very open and observant and dedicated, and you go out there and you challenge yourself and you do the thing, and then you grow up and you continue to do the same. And there's some people who are just not that interested, they're not that motivated, they're comfortable with what they know, and they grow up and they're the same. You know, that's her response to that. But the point is that we focus so much on whether you're interested or not, and overuse that in terms of analytically speaking, as though that's the reason, the cause behind people not adopting, rather than the effect of not yet entering this learning process, right? So it doesn't really matter when it's grounded in the reality that this is what institutions are now integrating technology to communicate with us, to exchange information, to pay our bills, to sign up for unemployment, to vote for, for this or that, to buy a ticket, to do your homework, to learn. It's just the interest is the lack of interest under a system that we know, especially in California, is like that, is really an indicator of a problem, not the cause. It's the effect, making the cause even more difficult, right? But it's the reality, it's a reflection of that, And I've heard so many people in California that they were like, the fact that somebody taught them a class when this California Connects came and they did some introductory courses, that God bless them, is an indication of how far removed they are, that it becomes some mystical spiritual process rather than access to what most of us benefit from. So here again, when we're introducing people who say, oh, but they don't learn, it's also not grounding in the fact that time is required to acquire knowledge and experience, and that really does matter, and it begins by learning by doing, and then you use it in daily functions, and then you integrate into daily functions, then you become a producer, and there's different factors that make a difference, but it's a process, and we have to be careful when we evaluate programs about whether successful or not on the basis of that, and also not overstate how much is needed, because it's a disservice when it comes down to it in the implementation of designs of programs, just because I want to say yay, but the problem continues. And we really have to be careful that to develop systems or ideas or frameworks, ground these things that we want to help the society with, and what is, because otherwise they easily get thrown off course in political shifts. So who's affected? Well, here's just this map just to show you just how quickly these changes have happened, right? It's almost like overnight. But in terms of the exponential growth of internet broadband. And then two, this is from the Department of Commerce through the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, had the United States Census collect a supplement of who's connected or not during these times. And during the Obama, so you see a huge gap from 2003 to 2007. That's when the Bush administration disinvestment in the collection of that. So away from falling through the net, serious problem, to America Online, everything's okay, to no, this is a problem, let's invest through the stimulus package and create a Title VI Broadband Technology Opportunities Program to do something about the disconnect. So, but here, just wanted you to note that over time, Latinos and Blacks are consistently behind their counterparts, whites and Asians. That's just the pattern, okay? So, like I said, the U.S. Under the Obama administration, this is the latest broadband subscription rates that are available that the government says is a problem. So here, just to show, is that this is the comparative difference between the people who are disconnected in terms of household broadband subscription. Okay.
Does it change much if you're controlling for income?
Oh, we're going to get to that. Okay. So this is just so what the government did, and all the government did is just report from the supplement, the internet supplement collected. It's about 55,000 or more sampled throughout the United States. It's not detailed enough for different counties, so they just developed national rates for broadband subscription and computer ownership.
It seems like it kind of tapers off a little, or is it just because the timing decreases? Is that because it seems like from 2000 to 2009, you have a more or less steady rate of increase across all bars.
There's some increases, yes. There's some.
The rate of increases.
And then the rate of increase seems to fall off. Is that just because the time difference goes from 2 years to 1 year, or?
Could you point here, because I don't see.
Yeah, from 2010 to 2011, there doesn't seem to be much of a change at all.
No.
As compared
See,
to, like,
yeah. See, 2000, yeah, because they jumps over years. Yeah, it's not that much time. So the Obama administration has made a lot of effort to collect data and create data sets even that weren't available to try to get at this issue. So a huge problem is not even having the information. This is the best information that's available, and it's just a sample. It's not the census. And there was a lot of contention about including that in the census. It's a very political issue.
You don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Does your data include mobile broadband as well, or is it only fixed broadband?
No, it does. I mean, I mobile. Well, we already know that those are really. I do have information, but not in this actual presentation. But we already know that the Latinos and Blacks, a lot of the same populations, are high users of that and depend on internet. Mm-hmm. But I think that's problematic. That's why we say we ought to be thinking about connecting people to the network, right? And
Only includes fixed broadband, not mobile broadband.
no,
No,
internet.
or yes. Is broadband fixed broadband, or is broadband both fixed and mobile in this chart?
Let me see. Let me remember if it includes
Or the
mobile.
previous chart?
Yeah.
What do you mean by broadband?
It includes the DSL. It includes fiber optics. It includes the high-speed connection to the internet mechanisms.
That sounds like fixed.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that's your definition.
Yes. Fixed. It's fixed. So this is just this is actually subscribe. This is the household broadband subscription rate that the government reports. Okay. And they only report it by categories. So I just want to show you the categories that they report on to then show you how we develop some estimates for that. But here too, the computer ownership rates are also, there's high level, you could say high levels of disconnect. The lowest income here, the less than 25,000 category, are the people who are least connected. Yeah? So,
What you would expect with every income category,
Mhm.
higher probability.
exactly. Same thing, same pattern with the household computer ownership rate. And then here too, the less educated, right? The less than high school degree, 67%. I want you to remember that because then I'm going to show you what I think is the mapped distribution of that category in California. Same thing with the computer ownership for households for education. This is the pattern that has been consistent. And for the 65 years and over population as well, right? So if we think of these as indicators of digital destitution, then those are the people that are more likely to face it. So this is a map of the data from the CPS, which is the current population survey, the supplement of the government reported on. And notice that a lot of the white gaps is that it doesn't represent for the other states. So there's missing data for those areas, primarily because they're really small numbers. This one? No, I just mapped it so that you could see it, but that's from the government. That's from the results of this data set.
So it's linked to the age of the head household?
Oh yeah. The household. There's somebody who speaks for the household, and it's about them. The person who answers. Yeah, is that your question?
Yeah, no, it's just like a weird way to analyze the data because you would assume that in a household would have
Because
all from different ages.
because why? Oh.
In each household, you would have people who are 65 years or over. Also, we have.
They will document the age of the house, the person who's answering the questions, and then they will report on the people that live in the household. Yeah. So this is the map of that data set for California in terms of the distribution, the percentage of the distribution of people in those selected counties, right? And this is for the numbers. So here, the red spots here is imperial, so that's the border. So that makes sense, right? But here, Tulare, you'll see that there's a lot of this area is highly impacted by digital destitution. But anyways, so this is what the government that we mapped this data from the government. This is the number of people of households. So this is for the number. This is actual numbers. That's percentage. Yeah. Okay. So like I said, there is not a data set that would tell us we just have national subscribership rates like I showed you for income, for age, for education, and in the categories broken the way that they are, not selected by eye. That's what the government is saying. For the purposes of people who are going to develop programs to intervene in this problem, I thought it would be helpful to understand what's the distribution of this population and how can we create some sort of estimate. And this was my best solution for what we have with the information, right? So we have rates, subscribership rates based on that sample, the CPS supplement of the internet. But we don't have detailed demographic information around it for all counties. But we do also have from the census the American Community Survey, where we know how many people are within those categories. So collected all that data which is a 5-year estimate, and applied the subscribership, calculated the subscribership rate to the number of population within that category for county, right? To come up with some estimate of the people that would be connected and unconnected by whatever category we calculated, in this case was for income, to see the distribution of that. That make sense? Something very easy, but a lot of work. This is the validity of that projection method, since we are mixing data sets, right? California could be different than the United States. And in some categories, we overpredicted here in the household category. And in some, we underpredicted, but it's pretty good, not so bad. But at least we know what we ended up doing is, okay, we have this projection based on this calculation, and we also have this data set for the counties that we do have. Let's see how well they do.
What is the factor by which you actually did the connection? Because you're mentioning it at the household level. Mm-hmm. If you have two different data sets without a unique household ID, how do you really...
So what we did was something simpler than that. What we did is we just have a subscribership rate, right, that everybody agrees upon. And then we have actually a detailed data for each county in California of these demographic variables that the rates relate to. And so we just calculated how many that represented per county within that category.
So it won't be a household level indicator in any case?
It was using household data. So there's data for individual, there's an individual level subscribership rate, talking about individuals, and then there's a household subscribership rate, which is the one I was utilizing. We did calculate the individual, but the one that we focused on for different reasons, I focused on was household. And then we used data from the ACS on household, indicators of household around, for some indicators where it was for households.
Education,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. So considering that you can't map income and education to the particular subscriber based on the subscriber database, you will have to aggregate it at some level, isn't it? Was the aggregation at the level of the county or?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So what I did, for instance, is, okay, so we know what the subscribership level for these classified income categories, or for education categories, or age and race and ethnicity. And we just have a rate. For national level, we have California data county level around those same classifications. Mm-hmm. So what percentage does that represent if we rely on that subscribership rate? How many does that represent, and what's the distribution around it?
So it's a projection that if you have other factors impacting it, it will not be able to capture that.
Well, all it's doing is describing the number of, the estimate of the number of people per county where you're likely to see the people who are not connected concentrated in that space. That's it. It's not doing anything more than that.
Okay.
Yeah. I hope to get a data set where I can do all of that, but we're not there. That's why we have to do this, right? Because there is not such thing. Yeah. That's like I don't know when. We need lots of money to do that. But here, what we did, what I thought was interesting, see, if you look at this map, we're missing categories. And if you just looked at this map that is available from the CPS survey, from the government, the current population survey, You would think the problem is only in these areas, but if you look at these estimates, applying that calculation, you see too that on the northern parts of California, there's also a problem. Of course, there's less people up here. Oops. There's less people in the northern parts, you know, but it is an issue. And here, I think an invisible population are people, whites who are older, who are not ready to retire or who have retired, missed that learning curve, and now realizing that they need it for daily life functions, to communicate with family members, to pay a bill, to figure out how to get to the doctor, to get the information, and so forth.
I used to use low-speed communications at the internet to do email, etc. So some of those services can be provided with non-broadband services.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. And then people get frustrated though, and that's what's so interesting because they don't know what there is to know.
Okay,
and they
I just wanted to comment.
Okay, great. So here I just want to show, but here if you notice, Fresno, the Central Valley is an area that you'll see where it's a place that has high concentration of people who are disconnected, high concentration of people who are poor, low education, and so forth. So I start to see the pattern, okay? Like I said, the less educated are least connected. Now, what I decided was like, okay, so we're going to use the ACS and just look at 67% of the less than high school degree don't have technology. And so that would be about 1,292,940 households in that category that don't have it, okay? In California, okay? For that category. This is the distribution of those that have less than high school for blacks in the lowest education, okay? So, you know, there's some counties that are red that have, there's probably less African Americans there, but the ones that are there have really low education, right? So this is the distribution of African Americans with that level of education. This is Latinos. Now, this is one map that surprised me some more, even though I know the statistics. It was still amazing to map this, to see that most of the state is red, and that means that 31 to 73% of that population in those counties has less than a high school degree. That's pretty alarming. And, oh wait, was this blacks? This is for whites. Notice that there's no red for this less than high school category. And there's only blue, and it's only up to 11 to 20% in some states, but it's just the opposite. This is for Asian groups. This is for college degrees. Also notice very few red spots. And then here for Latinos, there's no red at all, right? It's mostly blue, and that's up to 10% of the population with a college degree or more. So they're widespread, but with very low education. Whites as well, they have a lot of them living in the coastal areas have a college degree. Notice that it's 31 to 70%. So when you look at the less than high school, 31 to 70% representation in the Latino map, it's 31 to 70%. So it's just the opposite. That was very, do you recall, or should I show you again? So, okay, notice that one, right? Red, 31 to 70% of whites have a college degree or higher. So this is really not a surprise. But look at 31 to 73% of Latinos have the lowest education around that. Okay. This is for less than $25,000. Again, 57% of them have less than $25,000. And this is the distribution for African Americans. And if you notice the red, there's a lot of African Americans here in the Central Valley. The same for Latinos in the Central Valley. The same for whites in the Central Valley, you know. And oh wait, actually up north as well. We often don't think about that population. And Asians as well, not doing so well in the Central Valley. And then we just mapped the income-based projections, again, the Central Valley and the northern and the border parts of California. And then I just wanted to show you like some, the percent of families living in poverty. Again, high levels of concentrated poverty, families in poverty in the Central Valley. For Black poverty as well, the people in the Central Valley. For Latinos, even higher in the Central Valley. And even whites in the Central Valley. Anyways, I just thought this was really funny. I saw it on the internet, but they said, I don't have an iPad, no iPhone, because no iMoney. And one thing that I wanted to sort of point out too is that because one of the solutions that I think we'll eventually have to deal with in terms of adjusting policy for these new problems is an affordable cost structure for addressing this, right? Because, and people during this administration are talking about it, the FCC's taking comments, which is revolutionary for this time. Revolutionary compared to the decade previous, or the administration before the Obama administration, or the last administration previous Obama, that was not to hear of it. But we have to note that there's always going to be some poor people who will never be able to afford the market price rate. So we have to think about what are we willing to do about that? Because unless people get their wages raised, it's not going to happen. So when that discussion is happening, they're also talking about a lifeline for broadband at home by household. But here I just want to show you the differences too in households by groups. So this is the average household size by county. A lot of orange and blue, kind of. This is for Latinos. Note how high it is. 3.6 to 4.4 mostly in most counties. And that means they share a lot of the technology. So the capacity, and they do fight over the resources, as I have found in my qualitative field work. There's a lot of negotiation around resources and manipulation and control, and sometimes helpful, sometimes not. And there's more people to compete. Okay. And then for Blacks too, it's pretty high. Asians in the Central Valley, higher. And this white households, there's only light, right? So there's smaller households. So we just did a correlation about poverty, and it is correlated this much. I think I already went through that. I just wanted to show you real quick. Here's the calculation. If you're interested, we can talk about it more. But I just mapped out what the income inequality is in California, the degree of income disparity, with a Gini coefficient, and this is what the inequality looks like. Also, an educational index to see what's the concentration of education for people. So here's again, we don't have that much time, but if you wanted to know more about it, here it is. But here's a mapping of it. And notice too, in the Central Valley, the score of 0 is lowest education, to 1 is highest education. That's how the education index works. And here again, you see that there's a high concentration of low education in the Central Valley, which is also the area that has the least connection. So the conclusion is that there really is so much more work to be done. That's why I'm so excited that you're all here, young, interested, engaged, and thinking about the only ways in which you can contribute to making changes, because digital destitution, I am convinced, I see evidence of it every single day, is a new form of inequality. It represents the evolution of poverty. And the question is, how do people function without it? And increasingly, it's more costly. And we see that there is a disadvantage in time, in energy, and in experience in being able to do things. It is causing inefficiencies in the social technical system and diminishing returns on investment. We have to remember we're interconnected, and it does matter if our low labor force has it or not. Just think about the gardener who's highly connected here in Palo Alto, can't get the information to his gardener who's not online. It makes things more inefficient. Or, you know, having to develop this new system of communication, but some people are online, some people are not. And when it comes to public issues, public institutional issues, you're creating 2 or 3 tiers of service that makes it more inefficient. We're investing all this money to make our systems more efficient, and yet by not including or preparing other people and places to get online, we're diminishing our returns on investment. And it is causing disorder in the reproduction of the means of production and consumption and exchange in communities, especially in areas where they're not connected. You know, what it does is that it makes it more it makes it nearly impossible, almost very difficult to enter a path of mobility if you're disconnected. And there is a disadvantage in that. And, you know, let's not be taken by what people are saying. You know, there's a lot of room for innovation, and like this, I think this does it best, that, you know, we need to rethink our strategy for the internet is going to go away and certain people need it, others don't, because it's just the way things are going here in this system. And solutions are just not simple. People need it to be available. It needs to be affordable. And affordable, not according to the market price rate. We have to ground it in people's income and you know, how many people live there and so forth. And policies that do encourage accessibility and support the use and training, and institutions that are supported in their transition to adapt to the changes, to make available these things, and has to start inside out, and a lot of people have yet to have that. They need support as well to adjust themselves, and knowledge about how to use it when they do have it. A lot of people have it, but they don't know how to use it. And part of the reason why they don't know how to use it is because we have yet to think about how to teach it. We learned by doing, but now we know a lot. And when somebody's faced that every day, you call somewhere, like get online, you get that information. You need the application, go online. You need more information, go online. You know, in order to learn more, go online. In order to apply, go online. Just go online. You know, and in a moment of need, it is very frustrating for people. So we also have yet to think about the pedagogy, you know. And so again, there's just so much work to do. And thank you for your attention. I appreciate it, and welcome any questions.